Julian Walker grabbed her wrist the moment her scent hit him, not gently. Like the most feared alpha in the North was fighting the instinct to pull his new bride against him in front of the entire council. The chamber went silent. Not the polite kind of silence either. The dangerous kind. Jenna Sinclair had been married to him for less than an hour, and already the alpha's grip was tightening around her wrist. A low growl rolled through Julian's chest before he could stop it. Gold flashed in his eyes. For one terrifying second, Jenna was certain the alpha was about to drag her against him and claim his new bride right there in front of everyone, which would have been humiliating. Also extremely unwise. Instead, Julian Walker released her like she was poison and stepped back, like touching her had burned him. The council stared, because the most feared alpha in the North had just reacted to his own bride, like she was the most dangerous thing in the room. The moment Julian Walker let her go, the council chamber stopped breathing. No one moved, no one spoke. Every wolf in the room had seen it. The alpha of Northern Ridge had grabbed his new bride like instinct had taken over, and then released her like touching her might destroy something he couldn't control. Jenna kept her face perfectly still. Years of negotiating with stubborn border traders had taught her the value of a calm expression. But her wrist still burned where his hand had been, not painfully, just aware, which was somehow worse. What was that? The council elder cleared his throat at the head of the chamber, clearly deciding to pretend nothing unusual had just happened. The union between the Northern Ridge Pack and the Sinclair territory is now recognized. They watched her the way wolves watched anything unfamiliar inside their territory. Quietly, carefully, deciding. The chamber smelled like wolf, smoke, leather, pine sap, and the sharp, wild scent of 100 predators watching her. Jenna resisted the sudden urge to look over her shoulder. Predators liked it when prey showed nerves. She had no intention of giving them the satisfaction, and beneath it all was something sharper. Wolf. Jenna had grown up around shifters near the border towns, but this was different, stronger, rawer. The scent filled her lungs and made her heart beat just a little faster. At the head of the chamber stood Julian Walker, her husband. The alpha of the Northern Ridge Pack didn't move much, yet somehow the entire room seemed to bend around his presence. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered beneath the dark, ceremonial leather, his dark hair falling slightly over his brow, as if even the wind didn't quite dare disturb it. Everything about him was still, controlled, too controlled, like a storm pretending to be a quiet sky, except his eyes. Even now, those pale gold eyes were fixed on her. Jenna felt the weight of that attention, like a hand closing slowly around her ribs. Not threatening, just unavoidable, like gravity. She shifted slightly under it. The council elder beside them cleared his throat. The union between the Northern Ridge Pack and the Sinclair territory is now recognized, the old wolf announced, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. This marriage secures peace between our lands and strengthens the winter supply routes. A murmur rippled through the gathered wolves. Not approval. Assessment. Jenna could feel it. They weren't just looking at her. They were watching him. Julian didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, silent and immovable as the stone pillars rising around them. The elder turned toward the pack. You will recognize Jenna Sinclair as the Alpha's Luna. The word moved through the chamber like a stone dropped into water. Luna. The title felt heavier than the ring on her finger. Jenna inhaled slowly and forced her shoulders to stay straight. She had known this would be difficult. She had not expected it to feel like stepping into a room full of predators. A tall wolf near the front shifted forward slightly. His gaze flicked between Jenna and Julian before he spoke. Respectfully, Alpha, we expected the Luna of Northern Ridge to be one of our own. The room went still. Jenna felt the tension immediately. The man's voice wasn't openly hostile, but the meaning was clear. Human. Outsider. Temporary. Jenna opened her mouth to answer. Julian moved first. It wasn't dramatic. He simply stepped forward half a pace. That was all. No raised voice, no bared teeth. But the entire room shifted instantly. Predators understood hierarchy, and Julian Walker did not need to prove his. But the effect was immediate. The air in the room shifted. He only looked at the wolf who had spoken. "She is my wife." The words landed with the quiet finality of a closing gate. His voice was low and steady, but something inside it carried a quiet finality that made the wolf lower his gaze instantly. No shouting, no threat, just alpha. Jenna felt the shift ripple through the chamber as the pack fell silent again. That should have reassured her. Instead, something inside her chest tightened. Because the same alpha who had just defended her was still watching her. His gaze didn't shift back to the council. It stayed on her, steady, focused, as if something about Jenna Sinclair had caught his attention and held it there, and that strange tension from earlier crept back in. Jenna couldn't explain it. Julian didn't look angry or cold. If anything, he looked almost intent, too intent, as if something about her had rooted his attention in place. For a moment, the room seemed to disappear around them. Jenna suddenly became aware of something else, his scent. It reached her now through the thick air of the chamber. Darker than the others, pine and winter air, and something deeper beneath it that made her pulse jump unexpectedly. Julian's jaw tightened slightly. His nostrils flared once, and then something changed. The sound that came from his chest wasn't loud. Most of the room probably didn't even hear it, but Jenna did. A growl, quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. His gaze sharpened on her. For one strange moment, she had the distinct impression that the alpha wasn't looking at her the way a man looked at his new bride. He was looking at her the way a wolf recognized something. Heat crept up the back of Jenna's neck. Why is he staring like that? And more importantly, why does it feel like he recognizes something? The elder continued speaking, unaware of the silent tension building between them. Tradition requires that the alpha present his Luna to the pack. The old wolf gestured toward Jenna. Julian didn't move immediately. Jenna noticed the way his hands had curled slightly at his sides, not tense, but controlled, as if he were holding something back. Finally, he stepped toward her. The movement was slow enough that she felt every inch of the distance closing between them. Her breath caught slightly. Julian stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she felt the heat of him immediately, closer than he had been all evening. For the first time, Jenna noticed how warm he was. The heat of his body radiated through the thin fabric of her dress. He lowered his hand. For a moment, it hovered between them. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Jenna knew what was expected. A simple gesture. The alpha presenting his Luna. She lifted her hand. Julian's fingers closed around hers, firm and certain. The contact sent a sharp ripple of awareness up her arm. His skin was rougher than she expected, warmer. And the moment their hands touched, Julian froze, completely. His grip tightened suddenly, like instinct had taken over before he could stop it. Not painfully, but firm enough that Jenna's breath stalled in her lungs. His eyes snapped to hers. Gold flashed brighter. The low growl in his chest returned, louder this time. Jenna felt the vibration through their joined hands. Something inside Julian had reacted. Strongly. For one heartbeat, she thought he might pull her closer, the way wolves sometimes did when claiming a mate. But instead, Julian released her, abruptly. Like the contact had burned him, he stepped back immediately. The motion was so sudden that a ripple of confusion moved through the gathered wolves. Jenna stared at him. Julian's face had already returned to perfect control, except for the tightness in his jaw and the deliberate rhythm of his breathing. What was that? The elder frowned slightly but continued. The Luna will now be escorted to the Alpha's chambers. Another murmur passed through the room. This one carried expectation. Warmth rose into Jenna's cheeks. Of course. The wedding night. The claiming. the final confirmation of the alliance. She glanced toward Julian. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened slightly. He turned toward the council. "Prepare the West Tower for Luna Sinclair." The chamber went silent again. Jenna blinked. The West Tower? That wasn't where the Alpha lived. The elder frowned openly now. "Alpha? Tradition requires—" "I'm aware of tradition." Julian's voice was calm, but the quiet authority in it shut the elder down instantly. "The West Tower," he repeated. Confusion spread through the room like a ripple. Separate quarters. That wasn't normal, not for newly mated wolves. Julian didn't explain. He simply turned away from the council and looked at Jenna again. For a brief moment, something conflicted flickered in his gaze. Something almost like frustration. Then it disappeared. He stepped closer to her again. Not touching. Just close enough that his scent wrapped around her once more. Jenna felt that strange awareness return instantly. Julian lowered his voice so only she could hear him. "You should rest." The words were simple, but the tension behind them wasn't. Jenna searched his face. "Are you sending me away?" Julian's eyes flickered. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else. Something honest. Instead, he stepped back again. "Yes." The single word landed quietly between them. Then the Alpha of Northern Ridge turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving his new wife standing alone beneath the watching eyes of his pack. And Jenna Sinclair realized something very strange about her new marriage. The most powerful wolf in the mountains had just defended her in front of everyone, but the moment their skin touched, Julian Walker had reacted like she was the most dangerous thing in the room. By the time Jenna reached the West Tower, the fortress had gone quiet. The escort Julian assigned to her, 2 silent wolves in dark guard leathers, left her at the heavy oak door without a word. One of them opened it, stepped aside, and waited for her to enter. No welcome, no conversation, just obedience to the Alpha's orders. Jenna stepped inside. The chamber was warmer than the council hall, a fire already burning in the hearth. Someone had prepared the room carefully, which meant the pack had planned for a Luna. Just apparently, not this one. The room itself was large but simple. Stone walls softened by thick woven rugs, a carved wooden bed against the far wall, and a narrow balcony overlooking the forested mountains. It wasn't a prison, but it wasn't the Alpha's quarters either. Jenna removed the ceremonial cloak from her shoulders and draped it over the back of a chair. Her mind replayed the moment in the council chamber. The way Julian had frozen, the way his hand had tightened around hers, and the way he had stepped back afterward, like touching her had been a mistake. She exhaled slowly. This was supposed to be a political marriage. She hadn't expected romance, but she also hadn't expected whatever that was. A soft knock sounded at the door. Jenna turned. "Come in." The door opened slightly, and a young woman stepped inside carrying a wooden tray. She was a wolf. Jenna recognized it now by the faint pine and iron scent that seemed to cling to the pack. The woman placed the tray carefully on the small table near the fire. "Food for you, Luna." The title still felt strange. Jenna nodded politely. "Thank you." The woman hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the door, as if checking whether anyone else had followed. Then she leaned a little closer. "Most of us didn't expect this marriage," she said quietly. Jenna almost laughed. "That makes 2 of us." The wolf woman studied her for a moment. "You should know something." Jenna waited. The woman lowered her voice slightly. "Alpha Walker isn't a man who hesitates." That wasn't exactly comforting. Before Jenna could ask anything else, the woman straightened and slipped out of the room, closing the door quietly behind her. Jenna stood there for a moment, staring at the door. Alpha Walker isn't a man who hesitates, so why does he keep pulling away from me? Most newly married men didn't treat their wives like unstable explosives. The next morning brought snow. Jenna discovered it when she pushed open the balcony doors and stepped into the sharp mountain air. The forest below the fortress had turned white overnight. Frost coated the branches and rooftops of the lower pack buildings. It was beautiful and isolating. She wrapped the fur-lined cloak tighter around her shoulders and stepped back inside. The fortress was already awake. She could hear movement through the stone halls, voices, boots on the floor, the distant sound of someone chopping wood in the courtyard. Jenna followed the sounds. If she was going to live here as Luna, hiding in the tower wasn't going to help. The hallway outside her chamber curved downward into the main levels of the fortress. She had barely made it halfway down the stairs when the first wolf noticed her. The man froze, then straightened instantly. Luna. The word spread quickly down the hall. 2 more wolves stepped aside as she approached. Respect, but cautious, like they weren't entirely sure what she was yet. Jenna continued down the corridor until she reached the main courtyard. The cold air bit at her cheeks immediately. The courtyard was alive with activity, wolves sparring near the training ring, others hauling supplies through the gates. And in the center of it all stood Julian Walker. Jenna stopped walking. Even across the open space, his presence dominated the courtyard. He stood inside the training ring with another wolf nearly twice his size. They circled slowly. Julian's posture was relaxed, too relaxed. The other wolf lunged first. Fast. Julian moved faster, not rushed, just inevitable. He caught the man's arm mid-strike, twisted, and sent him crashing into the dirt in one smooth motion. The courtyard erupted in laughter. Julian offered the fallen wolf a hand and pulled him back to his feet. No anger, no show of dominance, just control. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Then Julian's head lifted. His gaze locked directly on Jenna. The shift in the air was immediate. The wolves near her went quiet. Julian didn't move, but Jenna felt that strange tension return instantly. The distance between them stretched across the courtyard, and still his attention held. His nostrils flared slightly. Jenna felt it again. That pull again. His wolf. The muscle in Julian's jaw flexed. He broke eye contact first, turning back toward the training ring as if nothing had happened. Jenna wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or irritated. Being ignored by a powerful alpha should probably be comforting. Unfortunately, it was also mildly insulting. So he's going to pretend I'm not here. Fine. She stepped farther into the courtyard. The wolves parted slightly to make space for her. Julian finished the sparring match quickly, dismissing the other wolves with a short nod. Then he stepped out of the ring, straight toward her. Jenna felt her pulse pick up. Up close, he looked even larger than she remembered from the council chamber. The morning air carried his scent clearly now. Pine and frost, and something darker beneath it. Julian stopped a few feet away. Not touching. Not quite close enough to be comfortable either. You shouldn't be outside without guards. The first thing he said to her wasn't a greeting. Jenna lifted one eyebrow. I had 2 escorts last night. They were assigned to the tower. His voice remained calm, matter of fact. Jenna folded her arms. I didn't realize the courtyard required permission. A few nearby wolves suddenly became very interested in their training equipment. Julian's gaze sharpened slightly. You're the Luna now, he said quietly. That makes you a target. There it was again. Protective, not possessive. Just practical. Jenna studied him. Then perhaps someone should have explained that before leaving me alone in a tower. For a moment, it looked like Julian might respond. Instead, his attention shifted. His head tilted slightly. He inhaled once, and Jenna watched the change happen again. Subtle, but unmistakable. His focus returned to her slowly. That same intensity from the council chamber settled into his gaze. Jenna felt it land low in her stomach. What is it? She asked. Julian didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked briefly to the space between them, then back to her face. Nothing. The word came too quickly. Jenna stepped closer. Just one step. The distance between them shrank. Julian's reaction was immediate. His shoulders stiffened. His breathing slowed. Jenna noticed the way his hands curled at his sides again. The same controlled tension she had seen the night before. His wolf. It was reacting again. And suddenly Jenna understood something. He wasn't avoiding her because he disliked her. He was avoiding her because something about her affected him. The realization sparked a quiet surge of curiosity. She closed the remaining distance between them. Now they stood only a breath apart, her pulse jumping at the heat of his body so close to hers. The courtyard had gone very still around them. Julian looked down at her, his voice lowered. "Jenna." It was the first time he had used her name. She waited. Julian didn't step back, but every muscle in his body had gone rigid. "You should keep your distance." His voice dropped. "Before my wolf stops asking." Jenna tilted her head. "Why?" For a moment it looked like he might walk away again. Instead, his hand moved. Fast. He caught her wrist before she could take another step, his grip closing fast and unbreakable. The contact sent a sharp jolt of awareness through both of them. Julian's grip tightened instantly. The low growl returned to his chest. Jenna felt the vibration through their joined hands. His eyes flashed gold. For one heartbeat, neither of them moved. The tension between them sharpened. Then Julian released her, abruptly. He stepped back again. More space, more distance. His voice dropped lower when he spoke. "Because this marriage is already complicated enough." He turned away, starting back toward the training ring. "Jenna." His voice stopped her. She turned. Julian's gaze held hers. Tight, controlled. Like he was choosing his next words very carefully. "You should keep your distance." "Why?" His jaw flexed. For a moment she thought he would walk away again. Instead he said quietly, "Because my wolf already knows what you are." Jenna's breath caught. His gold eyes held hers. "My mate." Jenna remained in the courtyard long after Julian walked away. The wolves slowly returned to their training, but the quiet tension lingered in the air. Several of them glanced in her direction when they thought she wasn't looking. Not with hostility, with curiosity. The Luna who made the Alpha lose control. Jenna exhaled slowly and turned toward the fortress. The cold morning air had sharpened the strange feeling already building in her chest, confusion, frustration, and something else she didn't want to name yet. Because whatever was happening between her and Julian Walker, it wasn't normal. Inside the fortress, the stone corridors carried warmth from the great hearths below. Jenna wandered without much direction, following the quieter hallways until she reached a narrow chamber lined with wooden shelves. Books, scrolls, records of pack history. The scent of old parchment and dust filled the room. Jenna stepped inside. If she was going to survive living here, she needed to understand the pack. She ran her fingers along the spines of several worn volumes. Territory disputes, pack alliances, bloodline records. Most of it meant very little to her, until one title caught her attention: Alpha Bonds and Imprinting Rituals. Jenna hesitated before pulling the book from the shelf. Then curiosity won. Curiosity had always been her most dangerous habit. The pages were worn with age. She flipped through them slowly. The text was blunt. When an alpha wolf recognizes his true mate, the bond can ignite through physical contact. In rare cases, the reaction is immediate and violent. Jenna frowned. Violent? She read further. In some alphas, the wolf's instinct to claim becomes overwhelming. Without restraint, the bond can form before the mate fully understands what is happening. Jenna's mind flashed back to the council chamber. The grip, the growl. The way he had stepped away like touching her might start a war, which, apparently, it might. Julian's grip tightening, the growl in his chest. The way he had released her like touching her might start something he couldn't stop. Her stomach tightened. Is that what this is? The scent reached her before the sound of footsteps. Pine. Winter air. Wolf. Jenna's pulse jumped. She didn't need to turn to know who had entered the archive. Slowly, she looked up. Julian stood in the doorway, still, watching her. His gaze moved briefly to the book in her hands, then back to her face. Something dark flickered in his expression. "You shouldn't be in here." His voice was calm, but Jenna recognized the tension beneath it. She lifted the book slightly. "I was reading." Julian stepped into the room. The space suddenly felt much smaller. "Pack archives aren't open to everyone." "I'm your Luna now," Jenna said evenly. A brief silence followed. Julian didn't argue. Instead, his eyes dropped to the page she had been reading. He recognized it immediately. His jaw tightened. Jenna noticed. "You already knew I'd find this eventually," she said. Julian didn't respond, which was answer enough. Jenna closed the book slowly. "Is that why you won't touch me?" The question settled heavily in the quiet room. Julian's gaze snapped back to her. For a moment, something fierce moved behind his eyes. Not anger, restraint. "You shouldn't be worrying about pack myths." "That's not a myth," Jenna replied quietly. "Your reaction proves it." Julian exhaled slowly. The sound was controlled, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable. He took another step into the room. Now only a few feet separated them. "Jenna." Her name sounded different when he said it this time. Lower, more deliberate. She didn't move. "You're avoiding the question," she said. Julian's eyes flicked briefly to the book again, then returned to her. "What happens if I tell you the truth?" Julian's voice was quiet, but there was something behind the question. Something cautious, like a man standing very close to the edge of a cliff. Jenna folded her arms. "I would appreciate that." Another pause. Julian studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "My wolf already recognizes you." The words landed quietly between them. Jenna blinked. "What?" Julian held her gaze. "As my mate." The room seemed to go completely still. Jenna's mind struggled to catch up with what he had just said. Mate. That wasn't part of the political agreement. This marriage was supposed to be strategy, alliance, not— "That's not possible," she said. Julian's expression didn't change. "It doesn't care what's possible." Jenna glanced briefly at the book in her hands, then back at him. "And touching me would trigger the bond." The words were blunt, honest. Julian's voice dropped lower. "And once that happens, the wolf doesn't ask permission." Jenna felt the weight of the meaning immediately. "You think you'd trap me?" Julian didn't deny it. "Yes." Something tight formed in Jenna's chest. "So, instead, you plan to spend the rest of our marriage pretending I don't exist?" That wasn't the plan. His gaze sharpened slightly. "The plan was to give you time." "For what?" "To decide whether you actually want this bond." Jenna stared at him. "You're serious?" Julian nodded once. "Yes." The simplicity of it left her momentarily speechless. She had expected arrogance, dominance, claiming, not restraint. Jenna looked down briefly, gathering her thoughts. When she looked up again, Julian had moved slightly closer. Not intentionally, just unconsciously. The space between them had narrowed. Jenna noticed his breath even out, his shoulders tightening. His wolf was reacting again. She stepped forward deliberately. One small step. Julian froze. His eyes flashed gold. "Jenna." The warning in his voice was unmistakable. She ignored it. Another step. Now she stood directly in front of him. The scent between them intensified immediately. Julian inhaled sharply. His control strained visibly. Jenna watched him carefully. "You're afraid of touching me," she said softly. Julian's voice came out rougher this time. "I'm afraid of not stopping." The honesty in the words hit harder than she expected. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt tight with something neither of them was pretending not to feel anymore. Then Jenna did something reckless. She reached out. Her fingers closed gently around his wrist. The reaction was immediate. Julian's wolf surged forward. The growl in his chest rolled through the small room. His hand tightened around hers instinctively, his wolf reacting faster than the man. Gold flooded his eyes. Jenna felt the raw strength in his grip, the bond strain building like a storm waiting to break. Julian tore his hand away. He stepped back so abruptly, the chair behind him scraped across the stone floor. His breathing had changed now, deeper, more controlled, like someone holding back a dangerous instinct. "Don't do that again." The words came out low, not angry, a warning. Jenna rubbed her wrist slowly. "You felt it." Julian didn't deny it. "Yes." Jenna tilted her head slightly. "Then maybe we should stop pretending this marriage is simple." Julian stared at her. For a long moment, the alpha and the woman he had been forced to marry simply stood there, neither willing to step away first. Finally, Julian turned toward the doorway. "There are rival packs watching our borders." Jenna frowned. "Changing the subject?" she asked. Julian's gaze held hers. "No." A beat. "It's a warning." He looked back at her. "They're waiting for weakness. And a political marriage that looks unstable would qualify." Understanding settled slowly. Jenna crossed her arms again. "So we have two problems." Julian nodded once. "Yes." Jenna lifted the book slightly. "Your wolf." Julian's gaze held hers. "And the packs who would gladly tear this alliance apart." The tension between them thickened. Jenna realized something in that moment. The bond between them wasn't the only danger surrounding this marriage, and judging by the look in Julian Walker's eyes, the real trouble hadn't even started yet. The fortress felt different after that conversation. Jenna noticed it immediately, not because the wolves treated her differently. If anything, they were even more careful around her now, but because every time she entered a room, Julian Walker was aware of it. She could feel it, across hallways, across rooms, across entire courtyards. His attention found her instantly, and just as quickly, he forced himself to look away. The first few times Jenna thought she might be imagining it, until the evening council meeting. The council chamber filled quickly. Torches burned along the stone walls, casting warm gold light across the long table where the pack's senior wolves gathered. Jenna entered with one of the guards assigned to her. The conversation in the room dipped slightly when she appeared. Not silent, but quieter, watching, evaluating. The Luna who had appeared out of nowhere to marry their alpha. Jenna walked to the seat beside Julian's. It had clearly been prepared for her. That fact alone stirred a small wave of whispers along the far side of the table. Julian was already there, seated at the head. His posture was relaxed, one arm resting on the back of the chair as he listened to the beta speaking. But the moment Jenna approached, Julian's head lifted. His gaze found her immediately. The same reaction she had begun to recognize. His nostrils flared once, his wolf reacting before the man could stop it. Jenna felt the awareness ripple through her again. That strange pull. She slid into the chair beside him. The distance between them was barely a foot. Julian didn't look at her again, but she noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the effort it took for him to remain completely still. The beta finished his report. Movement along the southern ridge. 2 patrols reported unfamiliar tracks near the border. Julian leaned forward slightly. "Which pack?" "Hard to say yet," the beta replied, "but they weren't trying to hide." A quiet murmur moved through the council. Jenna watched the exchange carefully. She might not understand pack politics yet, but she understood tone. Something about the report worried them. Julian's voice remained calm. "Increase patrol rotations." The beta nodded. "And the alliance?" another elder asked, glancing briefly toward Jenna. The shift in attention moved around the table. Now they were watching her, and him. Testing. Julian noticed. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his hand on the table. Closer to Jenna's, not touching, but close enough that every wolf in the room understood the message. Claim, authority, protection. "Nothing about the alliance has changed," Julian said. His voice carried easily through the chamber. Jenna felt the signal immediately. He wasn't touching her. but he was placing himself between her and the council's scrutiny. The room quieted, satisfied, for now. The meeting continued. Territory disputes, supply deliveries, winter hunting routes. Jenna listened, absorbing what she could, but the entire time she remained painfully aware of one thing. Julian. His presence beside her filled the space like heat from a fire. Every now and then, the faintest shift of air carried his scent toward her. Pine, snow-cooled air, wolf. And each time it happened, she noticed the same thing. Julian went still. He was constantly aware of her too. The realization sent a strange ripple through her chest, half curiosity, half something warmer. The council meeting ended nearly an hour later. The wolves began filing out of the chamber in small groups. Jenna remained seated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Julian stood. Instantly the room seemed to shift around him. Even the departing wolves stepped aside automatically. Alpha. Jenna rose as well. Julian glanced down at her. For a brief moment, the two of them simply stood there. Then one of the older council wolves approached, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. He studied Jenna openly. "You're adjusting quickly," the elder said. Jenna offered a polite smile. "I'm trying." The elder nodded slowly. Then he turned his attention to Julian. "Your control is impressive." Julian's expression didn't change. "What do you mean?" The elder's gaze flicked briefly between them. Most alphas would have completed the bond by now. The words hung in the air. Julian didn't respond. The elder chuckled quietly. "Perhaps restraint is wise." Then he walked away. Jenna watched him go. Then she turned to Julian. "Is that how the pack sees this?" Julian didn't answer immediately. He began walking toward the exit. Jenna followed. "Yes," he said finally. "They're waiting to see if the bond happens. And if it doesn't," Julian's voice was blunt, "then they'll assume the alliance failed." They stepped into the hallway. The corridor was quiet now. Most of the pack had already dispersed. Jenna stopped walking. Julian turned back. The distance between them shrank again. "You're under a lot of pressure," she said. Julian studied her carefully. "That's not new." Jenna crossed her arms. "But this part is." Julian didn't deny it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Jenna asked the question that had been bothering her since the library. "What happens if the bond does trigger?" Julian's gaze darkened slightly. "My wolf claims you." "And you?" Julian held her gaze. "I don't get much say after that." Jenna considered that. "You make it sound terrifying." Julian's voice dropped slightly. "It can be." The honesty in the answer surprised her again. Most alphas she had heard stories about would have bragged, claimed dominance. Not Julian. He treated the bond like a responsibility, or a risk. Jenna stepped closer without thinking. The space between them changed immediately. Julian noticed. His breathing slowed again. Jenna looked up at him. "What if I'm not afraid of it?" Julian's eyes flashed gold for a brief moment, his wolf reacting instantly to the implication. "Jenna." Her name came out as a warning, but she didn't step back. For the first time since arriving at the fortress, she felt the tension between them tilt slightly in her favor. He was the one holding back. She reached out slowly. Julian's hand moved at the same moment. He caught her wrist again. The contact sparked instantly. Heat, awareness. The low growl returned to his chest. Jenna felt the vibration through their joined hands. Julian's grip tightened, his control visibly strained. For a moment it looked like he might pull her closer. Then his jaw tightened. He released her, stepping back again. Always stepping back. Julian ran a hand through his hair. Frustration flickered briefly across his usually calm expression. "You're playing with something you don't understand." Jenna rubbed her wrist slowly. "Then maybe you should explain it better." Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that shifted the entire conversation. "My wolf doesn't want patience." Jenna felt the meaning immediately. "What does it want?" Julian's voice dropped to a rough whisper. "You." The word landed between them like a spark. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then footsteps echoed from the far end of the hallway. A guard hurried toward them, his expression tense. "Alpha." Julian turned instantly. "What is it?" "Scouts returned from the southern ridge." The guard's voice was tight. "They found signs of a rival pack camp less than 5 miles from the border." The tension in the hallway shifted immediately. Julian's Alpha focus snapped back into place. "How many?" "Unknown." Julian nodded once. "Gather the patrol leaders." The guard hurried away. Julian turned back toward Jenna. The brief moment of intimacy between them had vanished, replaced by the calm authority of a pack leader preparing for trouble. "Stay inside the fortress tonight." Jenna frowned. "That sounds like an order." "It is." Julian's voice softened slightly. "Until we know what they're planning." Jenna studied him. "You think this has something to do with the alliance?" Julian met her gaze. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation, because rival packs weren't just watching their borders. They were watching their marriage. And if anyone believed the bond between Alpha Julian Walker and his new Luna was weak, they might decide this was the perfect moment to test it. The storm had swallowed the mountains. Somewhere below the fortress walls, wolves were moving through the forest. By the time darkness settled over Black Ridge Fortress, the peaks had vanished behind a curtain of white wind and drifting frost. Inside the fortress, the pack had shifted into quiet readiness. Patrols doubled. Guards moved through the corridors more frequently. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. Jenna stood near the window of the West Tower, watching the storm swallow the forest below. 5 miles from the border. A rival pack that close wasn't a coincidence. It was a test, or a warning. Behind her, the fire crackled softly in the hearth. The chamber felt warm, but Jenna couldn't shake the restless tension sitting just under her skin. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the hallway earlier, to the moment Julian had said, "My wolf doesn't want patience." The words replayed again in her mind. "What does it want? You." Jenna exhaled slowly. The strange pull between them had only grown stronger throughout the day. Every room they entered together, every moment their eyes met, the awareness between them had sharpened. And Julian had continued doing the same thing, stepping back, always stepping back. A knock sounded at the door. Jenna turned. "Come in." The door opened. Julian stepped inside. He filled the doorway immediately. Tall, broad, snow clung to his dark coat, melting slowly in the warmth of the room. Jenna felt the shift in the atmosphere the moment he entered. His scent followed him, and her pulse reacted instantly. Julian closed the door behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jenna lifted an eyebrow. "Is this a security inspection?" Julian's mouth almost curved. Almost. Something like that. He stepped farther into the room. The distance between them slowly closed. Jenna noticed the same thing she always did when he approached. The deliberate control in every movement. The way he measured the space between them carefully, as if proximity itself was dangerous. "You didn't answer my question earlier," she said. Julian's gaze sharpened slightly. "Which one? What happens if the bond forms?" Julian studied her for a moment. Firelight flickered across his face, softening the hard angles of his expression. "You already know the answer." "Your wolf claims me," Jenna said. Julian nodded once. "And then?" His voice lowered slightly. "Then the bond settles." Jenna frowned. "That sounds almost calm." "It is." The answer surprised her. Jenna tilted her head. "You talk about it like it's something you're trying to protect me from." Julian looked at her steadily. "I am." Jenna crossed the room slowly. The movement brought them closer again. Julian's posture tightened slightly. Jenna noticed. "You think I wouldn't choose it?" Julian didn't answer immediately. The silence itself spoke volumes. Jenna stepped closer again. Now only a few feet separated them. "You don't trust my decision." Julian's voice dropped quietly. "I don't trust my wolf." The honesty caught her off guard again. Jenna studied him carefully. "You're afraid you'd lose control." Julian held her gaze. Yes. The answer was simple, direct, and completely sincere. Jenna felt something shift inside her chest. Because the alpha standing in front of her, this powerful wolf who commanded an entire pack, wasn't afraid of claiming her. He was afraid of trapping her. She closed the remaining distance between them. Now they stood barely a breath apart. Julian went very still. His breathing slowed. The space between them felt dangerously close. Jenna could feel the heat of him now, the steady strength in his presence. "You're very careful with me," she said softly. Julian's voice dropped to a rough murmur. "Someone has to be." Jenna lifted her hand slowly. Julian's eyes followed the movement instantly. She placed her fingers lightly against his chest, right over his heart. The reaction was immediate. Julian's breath caught. Another growl rose in his chest. Jenna felt the vibration beneath her palm. His hand closed around her wrist again, larger and warmer than hers, holding it still against his chest. Not pulling her away, just holding it there. The contact sent a sharp ripple through both of them. Julian's eyes flashed gold, his wolf pressing forward again. "Jenna." Her name came out as a warning. But his grip didn't loosen. For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension stretched tight between them. Then, a horn sounded outside the fortress, sharp, urgent. Julian released her instantly. The alpha snapped back into focus. Another horn blast echoed through the night. Jenna's stomach tightened. "What is that?" Julian had already turned toward the door. Alarm signal. His voice had shifted. Alpha again. Controlled. Dangerously calm. "Stay inside the tower." Jenna crossed her arms. "That sounds familiar." Julian paused at the door and looked back at her. For a moment, the protective intensity in his eyes softened. "Tonight I'm serious." A brief pause. "Try not to test that." Jenna held his gaze. "I can take care of myself." Julian shook his head once. "I know." His voice dropped slightly. "That's not the problem." Before she could ask what that meant, he opened the door and disappeared into the corridor. Jenna moved to the balcony. The storm had thinned slightly. Below, the fortress courtyard had exploded into motion. Wolves were shifting, guards running toward the outer gates, torches flared along the walls. And at the center of it all stood Julian Walker. The alpha barked orders with quiet efficiency. Within seconds, the pack had formed organized patrol lines. Jenna watched as Julian stepped toward the gate. One of the scouts rushed toward him. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in the man's posture. Julian listened. Then his head lifted slowly. His gaze swept across the fortress. Jenna had the strange feeling he knew exactly where she was standing. 5 miles from the border had just become something much closer. Because the rival pack scouts hadn't stopped at the ridge. They were already moving through Northern Ridge territory, and if they were bold enough to approach the fortress itself, they weren't here just to test the borders. They were here to challenge the alpha. Jenna barely had time to step back from the balcony before the tower door burst open. One of the fortress guards stumbled inside. Not one of Julian's inner sentries. Wrong scent. Wrong face. The wolf lunged. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Jenna grabbed the iron poker from beside the hearth and swung hard. The metal connected with his shoulder, knocking him sideways. But a second wolf rushed in behind him and caught her around the waist before she could run. She drove her elbow back, twisted, fought to break free. The male was larger, already dragging her toward the door. "Move!" he snarled. "Now!" Jenna planted her feet. The first wolf recovered and crossed the room, fury burning in his eyes. "The alpha wants a political bride?" he sneered. "Let's see how stable the alliance looks when she disappears." Fear hit sharp and cold. Anger followed right behind it. So that was the plan. Not border pressure, not intimidation. Her. They forced her into the corridor and down the servant stairs, avoiding the main halls where Julian's wolves were gathering for defense. The fortress had descended into chaos, horns sounding, boots striking stone, distant shouts echoing through the walls. Jenna fought every step. By the time they reached the outer passage, one of the wolves had a cut across his cheek from her nails, and the other was swearing under his breath from the kick she had driven into his knee. Snow hit her face the moment they dragged her outside. The storm had turned the lower yard into a blur of white and torchlight. They hauled her toward the tree line below the walls, keeping low, using the confusion as cover. Jenna twisted again. This time she wrenched one arm free. She screamed, not once, twice. The sound ripped through the storm. One of the wolves clamped a hand over her mouth, but it was too late. From somewhere above them, a roar answered. Not human. Wolf. Every muscle in the male holding her went rigid. He looked back toward the fortress wall, sudden panic flashing across his face. Jenna didn't see Julian shift. She felt him. The way the air changes just before lightning strikes. Felt the change in the air as if the entire mountain had just woken up angry. The wolves dragged her deeper into the trees, but their movements had changed now. Fast, sloppy, frantic, because the alpha was coming. Branches whipped at Jenna's face as they pushed through the forest. Snow cracked beneath their boots. One of the wolves kept muttering that they only needed to reach the ravine, just needed to get her across the ridge. They never made it. The first male vanished with a choked sound. 1 second he was beside her. The next he was gone, slammed into the darkness between the trees by something massive and violent. Jenna stumbled free and turned just in time to see it. A huge black wolf hit the second male with enough force to send him crashing backward through the snow. Julian, or what was left of Julian's control. His wolf was enormous in the storm, black fur streaked with snow, gold eyes burning with something that made the entire forest feel too small to contain him. The growl that tore from his chest was so deep, Jenna felt it in her ribs. The male who had been holding her scrambled backward, hands raised. "Walker!" He never finished. The wolf struck again. Fast, brutal, absolute. Jenna backed into a tree, breath coming hard, her heart pounding so violently she could barely hear over it. The fight lasted seconds, not because the attackers were weak, because Julian's wolf was no longer fighting like an alpha defending territory. He was fighting like a mate who had found his female in enemy hands. When it ended, the forest fell still except for the storm. Julian turned to her. The wolf's chest heaved. Snow clung to his muzzle. His gold eyes locked on Jenna with terrifying intensity. For one heartbeat, she wondered if he even knew himself anymore. Then he crossed the distance between them. Not slowly, not carefully. He pressed against her, huge and shaking with fury, scenting her face, her throat, her hair, checking for injury. Jenna lifted a trembling hand to his fur. The contact sent a visible shudder through him. A moment later, the wolf stepped back. Julian shifted. He dropped to one knee in the snow, breathing hard, bare skin steaming in the cold. One hand braced against the drift, while the other reached for her. Jenna. Her name came out rough. Not controlled now, barely held together. She dropped to her knees in front of him. "I'm here." Julian's hand slid to the side of her neck. Then his gaze dropped. Blood. A shallow cut near her temple, where a branch or rough hand had caught her during the struggle. Not deep, but enough. Julian inhaled once. His eyes flashed. Jenna saw the exact moment his control broke. His hand moved from her neck to her jaw, then to the back of her head, pulling her against him. Skin met skin. The bond ignited. It wasn't pain. It was impact. Like stepping into a current you hadn't realized was already carrying you. Heat tore through Jenna so suddenly her breath vanished. Every part of her lit up at once. Her pulse, her skin, her lungs, even the frantic beat of her heart. Julian's scent flooded her senses until it felt like it had always belonged there. Pine. Winter air. Wolf. Him. Julian made a low sound against her hair, half growl, half relief. His arms locked around her with a force that should have frightened her, solid, immovable, like he wasn't letting anything take her away again. Instead, for the first time since the marriage began, everything inside her went still. Safe, chosen. His forehead pressed against hers, his breathing uneven. I tried to give you time. Jenna's fingers curled against his shoulders. I know. Julian's eyes searched hers. No distance left now, no holding back, only fierce certainty. Tell me to let you go. Jenna looked at him, at the man who had stepped back again and again when every instinct in him wanted the opposite. She knew the answer before she spoke. I'm not asking you to. Julian closed his eyes for 1 second, as if the words struck somewhere too deep for speech. Then he lifted her into his arms and rose. This time, he did not step back. By the time Julian carried Jenna through the fortress gates, the entire courtyard had gone silent. Wolves lined the walls, the steps, the training ring. Every eye turned toward them. Toward the Alpha holding his Luna against his chest. Toward the unmistakable bond settling in the air between them. Julian didn't slow until he reached the center of the courtyard. Snow melted in his dark hair. His expression was calm again. But it was a different kind of calm now, not restraint now, possession, protection, certainty. He set Jenna gently on her feet, though one arm remained around her waist. A council elder stepped forward, taking in the blood at Jenna's temple, the certainty in Julian's eyes, the bond every wolf in the yard could scent. No one touches her again, Julian said. His voice carried across the courtyard with lethal clarity. She is my mate. She is my Luna. And any pack that comes for her comes through me. No one challenged him. No one would. The elder bowed his head first. Then the others followed, one by one, until the entire courtyard acknowledged what the storm and the forest had already decided. Jenna looked up at Julian. So this is the part where the whole fortress stops pretending. Julian's mouth almost curved. More or less. He turned her toward the warmth of the fortress, but Jenna caught his hand. Julian looked down. She held his gaze and let the new bond settle between them. No longer sharp and overwhelming, but deep and steady. You know, she said softly, you could have touched me sooner. Julian exhaled. I'm aware. Julian's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles. The touch was gentle, but he didn't pull away this time. And I might have chosen you sooner. Something fierce and almost disbelieving moved in his eyes. Then his hand rose to her face, gentler than she would ever have expected from a man who could tear through enemies in the snow. His fingers rested against her cheek. Warm. Steady. That choice, he said quietly, is the only one that mattered. Jenna leaned into his touch. Julian studied her for another moment. Then his hand slid to the back of her neck, drawing her slowly against him. You chose me, he said softly. Jenna's lips curved. I did. Julian didn't hesitate this time. He bent and kissed her, his hand still steady at the back of her neck. Certain. Claiming. Jenna rose onto her toes and kissed him back, her hand gripping the front of his coat as the bond warmed deeper between them. For a moment, the entire courtyard disappeared. No council, no rival packs, just the two of them. When they finally separated, Julian rested his forehead briefly against hers. Mine, he murmured. Jenna smiled softly. And you're mine. Around them, the courtyard remained respectfully silent. But the tension had vanished. The Alpha had chosen. And the Luna had chosen him back. The days that followed would bring consequences. Rival packs would retreat or challenge openly. The council would have to face what had nearly happened inside their own walls. The alliance with the human settlements would need to be reinforced, not just with marriage papers, but with strength. But none of that changed the one thing that mattered most. Julian no longer stood apart from her. At dawn, when they stepped onto the fortress wall and looked out across the snow-covered mountains, his hand found hers easily, as if it had always belonged there. No hesitation, no stepping back, just the Alpha, and the woman he had tried so hard not to claim. Jenna looked out over the white forest below, then up at the man beside her. What happens now? Julian's gaze lingered on her before lifting to the horizon. Now, he said quietly, no one takes you from me again. Jenna stepped closer beside him, her shoulder brushing his. And this time, when his fingers tightened around hers, she moved even closer. The mountains stretched white and endless below them, and for the first time since the alliance began, peace settled over Blackridge. Please like, share, and subscribe for more Fated Mate stories.